it's almost the time, but let's start punctually, so maybe someone will join us, because I still see some people are coming in our room. And our great lecture. Ladies and gentlemen, dear guests, dear students, this is all for you today. It is our great pleasure to welcome you to another session in our Meeting with Science lecture series at the Pomeranian Medical University in Szczecin. And we are delighted to see such a strong interest in the scientific dialogue and knowledge exchange. Today's event is particularly special as we have the honor of hosting Professor Peter Stenvinkel, a world-renowned nephrologist, distinguished scientist, and a leading advocate of the planetary health. We warmly invite you to an inspiring lecture entitled Learning from Nature to Improve Human Health and the Concept of the Planetary Health. But, dear all, before we proceed to the lecture, I would like to kindly invite Professor Edyta Gołębiewska to introduce Professor Stenvinkel and present his distinguished academic and professional profile. So, Professor Edyta Gołębiewska, the stage is yours, I would say.
Thank you very much, but I had a little bit different perspective. Of course, Professor Peter Stenvinkel is an international expert, leader in many projects, with many achievements, leader in societies. But I would rather, the list would be very long, but I would rather share with you my small experience with Professor. So about 10 years ago, I first entered the division of nephrology in Karolinska Institute. I wanted very much to join the group, the network of really prominent specialists in nephrology, having the opportunity to look at their work. And that was the first time that I met Professor Peter in person, together with Professor Bengt Lindholm, also with Ulla Heimburger. And I knew from the first start it was the core of this international network. And one day I came there for a few short courses. And one day when I came, I learned that Professor Stenvinkel is away. He went somewhere, they told me, he went somewhere north to study brown bears and to study their habits, to study the metabolic pathways. And that was the moment that hit me very much. And then I knew that I am the nephrologist, but Professor Peter is much more bigger, because he presents this holistic view, planetary view, connecting the dots not only of humans but also with the nature itself. So I think that this, for me, would be the best introduction of Professor. And Peter, the floor is yours. Thank you very much for coming, for having the time with us.
Well, thank you so much, Edyta, and thank you for inviting me to give this lecture. And I'm really sad I cannot be in person, but hopefully I will be able to share my lecture also digitally, so you can follow my things about how can learn from nature to make everyone healthier. And this is the concept of planetary health. So, well, you all realize we are living in a difficult world. It's an things are changing so fast, and the time we live in now is called the Great Acceleration. Irrespective if you talk about socioeconomic trends, Earth system trends, you can see that everything moves extremely quick now. And of course, one of the major problems we are combating now, trying to combat, is the excessive rise in carbon dioxide emissions. And actually, if any one of you like me have lived for about 60 years, we have now experienced climate changes that would be equivalent to what happens during 7 million years. And I think it's very important now that we that work as health professionals, we must understand the intimate links between our human health and the health of animals, what's happening on our planet with deforestation, global warming, defaunation, pollution, lack of clean water, loss of biodiversity, and of course, how we produce and consume our food. And I really believe that medicine can serve as a window through which we can observe the world and try to understand it. And we should realize that health is now the new phase of climate change. And I believe that many of our modern diseases, they are just a mismatch between the human biology that have been developed during evolution and the new environment that we now have created. So I'm really interested in this concept of connecting the dots, and I will show you now 2 examples of what I mean by this connecting the dots. And these are actually 2 headlines from the New York Times within the 3 weeks that I think is a good example of connecting the dots. First one is the surprising new research links between infant mortality to crashing bat populations. And the other one is the Hurricane Helen deaths that will continue for years. So let's start with the bats. So in certain parts of US, there have been problems with bat populations. They have been encountering what is called the white nose syndrome, which is a fungal disease that have devastating effects on hibernation bat populations. And bats are really important in nature because they ingest enormous amounts of insects and mosquitoes. So when the bat population decreased, there was an increase in the number of mosquitoes, and the farmers, they increased the pesticide use with 31%. And this led to an increase in infant mortality of 8%. The other example of connecting the dots are the hurricanes in the US between 1930 and 2015 caused up to 5.7 million excess deaths. And they were actually responsible for up to 5% of all deaths that occurred in the continental USA. And it's now clear that these tropical cyclones or hurricanes, they cause a disrupted healthcare. They have a long-term infrastructure damage, worsening of chronic diseases, severe mental health effects, and environmental exposures that causing such an enormous increased rate of excess deaths. So we are dealing with an invisible pandemic, and I think one of the keys for us to better understand the impact of the climate on outcomes in several burden of lifestyle diseases, we need to pay more attention to the certificate of death. A failure to record climate-related exposures on death certificates obscures the true burden of mortality attributable to tropical cyclones, as I just showed, particularly among patients with chronic kidney disease. And this relate and give rise to delayed deaths that often results from a cumulative climate-driven disruption in care and physiology. So I work with patients with chronic kidney disease, and there is now an urgent need for action regarding this disease. And recent data show that chronic kidney disease is projected to be the third cause of death in Western Europe by 2050. And here you can compare the 1990 rank cause of death to the projected 2050 rank cause of death. And there is probably no other disease in which there will be such a rapid increase in prevalence. And we believe that this is partly due to changes in the environment. Because the kidneys are particularly vulnerable to a rapidly changing environment. And we hypothesize in this paper in JASON that the rising global incidence of kidney disease reflects the impacts of climate change. So we know the kidneys are susceptible to microplastics, air pollution, toxins, heat stress, lack of clean water, the modern ultra-processed food, and also the pandemics will have effects on renal function. And we believe that kidney disease could be considered the new black lungs of climate change. When talking about changes in the climate, we need to pay attention to age. And here is an oversimplified sketch showing on the x-axis the chronological age. And this is the most common risk factor we use in healthcare. And when starting to think how you define chronological age, it is the unit that denotes the time it takes for the Earth to make one revolution around the sun. But this actually is not age per se that makes us older. It is what we call the wear and tear that we are subjected to during our lifetime, and that creates a biological age. Ideally, you will have a biological age that is younger than our chronological age. Maybe some of you are in that lucky position. For most of us, the biological age corresponds to the chronological age. But the problematic group are all those patients that we take care of in our hospital with burden of lifestyle diseases who have a much older biological age than chronological age. And these patients will cause a large gap between the health span and the lifespan. And the problem we now see is that what is happening on our planet with heat stress, air pollution, chemicals, and plastics accelerate the exact same mechanisms that promote aging. And we already know that environmental threats, that is what we call the exposome, contribute to accelerated biological aging. We know, for example, that lack of clean water is something that promotes premature mortality. It is shown, of course, that the pandemics like COVID-19 age us more quickly. Air pollution has also been demonstrated to promote biological aging, and this is a study using methylation-based biological age. And there are, at least in animals, studies suggesting that climate warming also accelerates aging mechanisms. So recently we have now access to quite robust methods to estimate biological aging, and these are the epigenetic clocks based on methylation dynamics in the DNA. And there are several studies showing that there are factors that actually accelerate biological aging. Not surprisingly, smoking, microplastics, multiple pregnancies, For those of us working with kidney patients, we know that phosphate accelerates aging. Space travel is something that accelerates aging, and we can all, I think, agree on this, looking at these photos of this female astronaut when she left space on the left side, and when she came back 9 months later. It is, at least to me, obvious that she had undergone accelerated aging. It has been a lot of discussions whether or not red meat accelerates aging. We have been working on chronic kidney disease with epigenetic clocks, and we can show with this third generation epigenetic clocks that patients with chronic kidney disease are about 5 years older biologically compared to their chronological age. And we can also show that in contrast, dialysis, renal transplantation lower or slower the epigenetic aging. Maybe more interesting are to find out what protective factors there are, factors that protect us against aging. Of course, caloric restriction, plant-based diet, and exercise, we already know that they protect us from aging. The link between our gut microbiome, especially lactobacillus, and the epigenetic machinery is fascinating. I will a little bit later discuss about hibernation in bears. That is also something that may be protective for aging. And then we have this thrilling story about the link between the anti-diabetic drugs and aging. And I think this intersection of diabetes treatment and aging is extremely interesting. And there are now studies suggesting that anti-diabetic drugs slow aging processes. We have, for example, this study that is published in Cell showing that metformin decelerates aging clock, and these are male monkeys. They could show that metformin prevented brain atrophy, elevated cognitive function in these primates. They could also show that metformin slows the pace of aging in different tissues, and they could show that metformin counterparts the neuronal aging via activating of the transcription factor NRF2. There are also studies now emerging like this one in Nature Aging showing that SGLT2 inhibition eliminates senescent cells and alleviates pathological aging. And there are now studies emerging that also GLP-1 receptor agonists may be key to turn back these epigenetic clocks. These are yet unpublished data. I think they are interesting because here they have compared a number of interventions and drugs on the effects on DNA methylation clocks and to see the size effects. And I find it really interesting that also in this comparative survey, they could show that metformin may be one of the most powerful interventions we can provide to slower the epigenetic aging. And on the other side of the spectrum, we have dialysis, something that we provide to our patients, and it seems like it accelerates aging processes. So let's discuss a little bit about plastics. And I must say, I was really frightened when I learned how much plastics we ingest. It has been estimated that every week we ingest about 5 grams of plastics with the food we eat, the water we drink, and 5 grams, this is equivalent to an ordinary credit card. And this will correspond to an ordinary lifetime if you live for 79 years to 20 kilograms of plastics. And this is that's more plastic than the 2 mobile recycling bins shown here. And in a landmark study that was published in New England Journal of Medicine and then commented on in Nature, it was shown that microplastics was linked to serious health problems. They could show that tiny plastic particles lodged in the blood vessels, and this increased the risk by 4.5 times for cardiovascular events such as heart attack and stroke. There is also concerning links between the ingestion of plastics and our brain, because a paper in Nature Medicine shows that there is indeed a bioaccumulation of microplastics in the human brains, and extremely worrisome that there was a greater accumulation of micro and nanoplastics in the brains with a documented dementia diagnosis. We have the air, and the majority of the population on the planet actually are breathing air that is unsafe. And here you can see, especially in the orange and the reddish parts, areas of the world where there is an excess of air pollution due to, of course, industry pollution from cars and airplanes, but not the least from the agricultural sector. We also have the wildland fire smokes, and that is now a problem in many parts of the world. And there are numerous papers like this one in PNAS showing that this wildlife forest fires is followed by an increased morbidity and mortality. They increase the risk for chronic kidney disease, heart disease, diabetes, and obesity. And we also know that air pollution is now estimated to contribute to more than 3 million causes of chronic kidney disease per year. And that suggests that about 10% of all cases of chronic kidney disease may be aligned to air pollution. But of course, it's not only humans that are affected by bad air. And this is something we really need to learn more about, because all ecosystems are exposed to bad air, and it will have effects on animals and plants. Heat-related mortality, you are well aware of this. This is from a paper in Nature Medicine showing that during the summer of 2022, there were more than 62,000 deaths related to heat stress in Europe. And you can see here in the map that, of course, the Mediterranean countries such as Spain and Italy and Greece were most affected. But these maps also show something very interesting, and this is that it seems like females are more affected by heat stress than males. And the reason for this, we do not know. We know, though, that heat-induced kidney disease is common, and it's been estimated that there are more than 25 million causes of chronic kidney disease due to heat stress around the world, especially in hotter regions of the world, such as in Central America and India and Sri Lanka. And we also know that heat stress in combination with insufficient intake of water will affect kidney function. And this is just a scheme showing how heat stress with this combination causes renal tubular damage, acute kidney injury, and decreased renal perfusion with glomerular ischemia. And here you see photos of two of these agriculture workers in Nicaragua working under extreme heat conditions with sugar canes. And there are some areas in these countries where a majority of young male workers in the agriculture sector actually have signs of kidney disease. And now a couple of words about water. And water stress is also an imminent threat to the planetary health. And just like air pollution, you can see here in more reddish colors that there are areas of the world where there's an extremely high risk already today for water stress, and it's the same regions in Middle East, Northern Africa, India, China, Mexico that are already today subjected to water stress. And water is really interesting because it's actually the link between the living and the non-living world, and the amount of fresh water has been constant during history, and there is absolutely no way we can produce more water. And at least 50% of the world's population experience some kind of water shortage for at least 1 month each year. So the more water that is polluted, the less fresh water is available for us to drink. And we know that the lack of clean water is linked to many chronic diseases. That has been shown in epidemiological studies that there is a link between water intake and risk of type 2 diabetes. There is a clear link between water intake and chronic kidney disease, obesity, and also vascular disease. And of course, we should, in these days, also be clear that I think one of the, of course, oil may be the most important reason, but water shortage play a significant role in all the conflicts that we now see in the Middle East. Biodiversity. And these are data from the World Wildlife Foundation showing the biodiversity loss since 1970. So let's look at Latin America and the Caribbean, which there have been a staggering 94% biodiversity loss since 1970. This is the most hardly affected region, but you can also see in Africa, there is a 65% biodiversity loss. In North America, 33%, in the Asian Pacific region, a 45% biodiversity loss since 1970. And here in Europe, we have a 24% biodiversity loss since 1970. So that is less than 60 years. This has been a rapid loss of biodiversity. And this loss of biodiversity in nature, from healthy ecosystems that like it should be, to the degraded ecosystems with species loss, is paralleled by a loss of gut microbial biodiversity. The gut microbiome that should be very diverse in our guts have now been dysbiotic. We are losing microbes in our gut, and this is something that we know is linked to many burden of lifestyle diseases. Eine kleine Nachtmusik is a beautiful serenade that was composed by Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart in 1787. This is a piece of music with many tones, and together they make up a beautiful piece of music. If you now think that you lose tones in this serenade at the same rate as you lose species on the planet, this once beautiful piece of music will not sound as good as it did 1787, and I think in 100 years there may not be many tones left to play, and this beautiful piece of music will sound quite awful. So this has been kind of a depressive start, but now I would like to turn to be more optimistic and try to see how we can find solutions. And the person that actually inspired me here was Albert Einstein. And he of course had many very intelligent quotes, but I think this is maybe one of his best. You should look deep into nature, and then you will understand everything better. And nature-based solutions is already working today to protect our planetary health. And I will give you some examples here. We use a lot of plants as medicine already today. For example, SGLT2 inhibitors, such as dapagliflozin, is something that is derived from the bark of the apple tree. We use animal poisons as medicine. Ozempic, GLP-1 receptor agonist, is something that was first derived from the saliva of a desert lizard, the Gila monster. I'm particularly interested to learn from eating habits in animals and how that can help us to understand what we should eat or what we should not eat. I will discuss this more later. We are also very interested to learn about metabolic patterns in animals that exhibit negligible senescence. That is, that they don't age. They age very slowly or they do not age at all. I will also discuss this a little bit later. We can learn about a lot from solutions in animals that already today survive in extreme environments. Animals that survive in environments without plenty of water, extremely warm areas. And I think we can learn a lot from solutions that have been developed in these animals to protect humans that now will encounter the same environments. We can also learn a lot from superorganisms that protect the environment. That superorganisms are organisms that work together with millions of organisms for finding a solution. For example, the Wood Wide Web, which denotes this intricate network of communication between trees under earth. You never see this. This is actually the major part of the trees you will find under earth. But here the trees communicate with each other and also with fungi to protect themselves against heat and drought. And of course, we can learn from nature-based solutions from plants and fruits and nuts that could help us to protect our health. And here I'm especially referring to all these fruits from Amazonas that are so rich in polyphenols and other ingredients. Together with Brazilian researchers, we actually did a survey of the Amazonian fruits for the treatment of non-communicable diseases. And Amazonas is the lungs of the planet. Extremely important for the well-being of the planet. And we are really worried about the deforestation of the Amazonas in Brazil, which has reached a record high. And you can see here the orange brownish parts are areas which we have lost forest due to deforestation for agricultural reasons. But instead of chopping the woods down, we should protect the forest in Amazonas because they harbor an enormous amounts of interesting fruits and nuts. And these are just a couple of more than 200 fruits and nuts that actually grow in Amazonas. And I must say, I was extremely impressed when we started to find out what the ingredients of these fruits are. And I must confess that before this study, I have hardly heard of any of these fruits, except maybe for guarana and acai. But look, for example, at camu camu in the top here, which is extremely rich in substances such as senolytics, NRF2 agonists that could be used to alleviate human health problems. And there have been discussions if we could protect people that are living in air polluted areas with fruits and plant-based foods that actually alleviates inflammation and oxidative stress. So Edita told you that I'm interested in bears, working on bears, but we have also been very interested in other animals that have developed solutions during evolution, protect them from different diseases. In green, you will see treatments that we are already working with in the clinical care. But we have also the giraffes, extremely interesting because they have so high blood pressures. It could be 300 above 180 millimeter mercury, but they never suffer from stroke, heart failure, or kidney disease. And this is a paper showing that there is a transgenic mice with a mutation found in giraffe that actually could give us new treatment for high blood pressure. We have the Greenland shark, which can live for up to 400 years. And they have a really very intricately connected network enriched for DNA repair. We have elephants that seems to be protected against cancer. And this paper in JAMA showed that they have 40 alleles of tumor suppressor factor P53 that protect them from cancer and make them cancer resistant. And then we have the bears, hibernating bears, really interesting animals that seems to be protected against osteoporosis, muscle wasting, thromboembolic complications, type 2 diabetes, atherosclerosis during hibernation. And this enigmatic period of hibernation may give us many clues for how to treat obesity and modify metabolism. And we should realize that hibernation is so much more than just deep sleep, and there are profound metabolic changes that occur during this enigmatic state. And that is something that, as discussed in this Nature Medicine editorial, can now be used to develop new treatments to trigger weight loss and alter metabolic pathways. So they are harmless when they sleep, and they like a comfortable life. When they are awake, they can be in a bad mood. They protect their young and can be dangerous if provoked. During certain periods, they eat nothing, but at other times, they like to eat a lot of berries and sweets. The other one is a brown bear, and that is what I now will be talking about. And we have been working on hibernating bears in northern Sweden for many years. These are research that is not going fast. You can maybe include 4 or 5 new bears per season. And here is one bear that we are doing CT scan on to do studies for osteoporosis. And because these are amazing. If you compare now the adult sheep to the left, that has been immobilized for a couple of months, you can see that there is quite severe osteoporotic changes. But compare it to the 1-year and 18-year-old bears, you can see that they are totally protected against osteoporosis. They also are protected against muscle wasting. That is a major problem if you have a sedentary lifestyle and if you stay in bed for a long time. And although they are sleeping for 5 to 6 months, they lose only a small amount of muscle tissue during this period. And this is a study showing that there is an upregulation of NRF2, this transcription factor, that protect them against inflammation and oxidative stress and make them resistant to muscle atrophy. We also had the opportunity to compare our wild bears to bears that are encaged, and this is a very tragic example of bears that are not living a good life. These are these bile farm bears that you find in Vietnam or China, and the purpose of this is to extract bear bile that is used in traditional medicine. They are served crappy food, they are encaged in conditions like this, and here we can see that these bears are no longer protected against all these diseases that the wild bears are protected against. These bears are chronically inflamed, they get chronic cholecystitis, chronic kidney disease, hypertension, left ventricular hypertrophy, and they have also an obese sarcopenia. Now let's switch on to talk about aging. And here is a picture of a fascinating woman in southern France, Jeanne Calment. And she is the longest living human that has been recorded. When she was about 10 to 11 years old, she actually met Vincent van Gogh, who came into her friend's store to buy painting material, and when she died 122.5 years later, she had herself experienced internet. That's quite an amazing lifespan to meet one of the greatest impressionists and also work on internet. And she was an amazing lady. She engaged in sport activities like tennis, swimming, and roller skating. When she was 85 years old, she took up fencing. Also, she had the spectacular eating habits. She ate a lot of chocolate. She drank port wine, and also she poured olive oil on all her food. And finally, she quit smoking when she was 117 years old. But this is nothing compared to what found in the animal kingdom. And here how we have some long-lived species. I told you already about the Greenland shark that live and sluggish life in slow motion for more than 400 years. They are sexually mature when they are about 200 years old. We have this Icelandic clam with a heart that beats for 500 years. And it's amazing just to think about a living creature that can live for 500 years. Although I must say, I'm not really want to change position, because it must be an extremely boring life on the bottom of the ocean. Together with an neuroscientist, we went through the literature to see all these long-lived animals with negligible senescence. Do they have anything in common? And we compare them what the literature reported about the naked mole rats, a rat that lived for more than 30 years. The ocean quahog, this is the Icelandic clam with the rawfire rockfish that lived for up to 200 years, and then this Greenland shark. And actually they had something in common. Of course, there was little or no predation. They usually live in a cold milieu, but they seem to have an increased expression of this transcription factor NRF2. They also have highly efficient mitochondrial function, even when they were at old age, and they were able to maintain their protein homeostasis. And all this may give us some clues how we should protect ourselves if we want to have a healthy and long life. So we have looked at all these burden lifestyle diseases, not only chronic kidney disease, but of course also heart failure, hypertension, type 2 diabetes, obesity. They have something in common. They usually have chronic inflammation and a downregulated NRF2. And if we want to learn about these diseases and how they should be combated, we need to know our history. Winston Churchill said that the longer you can look back, the further you can look forward. And if we want to look very, very far back in history, we should go to the Great Oxygenation Event. And that was the period in the history of Earth when photosynthetic cyanobacteria started to release massive amounts of oxygen. And whenever there is oxygen, there will be oxidative stress. Oxidative stress could be of benefit for cell structure synthesis and immune defense, but we usually regard oxidative stress as something that is bad for our body. Increased risk for mutations and cell damage, and it is now shown that the evolutionary origin of NRF2 is aligned to the timing of this global transition from anaerobic to aerobic conditions. And here we can also learn from animals that live in extreme environments. They have a survival advantage with an upregulation of NRF2. This has been shown for bats. We know that bats are protected against cancer. They live comparatively long. They can harbor nasty viruses without getting sick. They have an upregulation of NRF2. I already told you about the hibernating bears that upregulate NRF2 during hibernation. We have this really ugly rodent, the naked mole rat, that can live amazingly long life for being a rodent, more than 30 years. They have an upregulation of NRF2. And then we have the seals. And the seals is for a nephrologist just amazing, because they dive down many hundred meters, periods up to 2 hours. And during this period, they shunt away all the blood from the internal organs to give oxygen to the heart and the brain. So there's virtually no circulation in their kidneys for prolonged periods, but they never develop acute kidney injury. And maybe this an activation of NRF2 due to prolonged fasting periods protect them against acute kidney injury. We can also learn from human models of accelerated aging, and we have these poor children with Hudson-Gilford progeria syndrome. This is actually a picture of an 18-year-old boy, and they have an extensive prematurely aged phenotype. And it's now known that they have a downregulation of NRF2. And we recently shown that patients with chronic kidney disease, they have exactly the same somatic mutation as is found in this Hutchinson-Gilford progeria syndrome. And this is maybe one of the major reasons why they developed an early vascular aging phenotype. So NRF2 is very interesting. It's a two-component system with increased NRF2 expression and inactivation of KEAP1. And if this is activated, there will be an upregulation of hundreds of cytoprotective genes that reduce oxidative stress and inflammation. And our lifestyle affects this transcription factor. We know we can upregulate it with exercise, whereas if you're subjected to psychosocial stress, you smoke, you have accumulation of uremic toxins, a poor diet, or is subjected to air pollution, this will downregulate NRF2. There are ways to stimulate NRF2 with synthetic NRF2 stimulators. The most potent one being bardoxolone, but we should be aware of that drugs that we commonly use, such as metformin, statin, and lithium, all stimulate NRF2. But there are also bioactive compounds and fermented food, such as curcumin and rosemary and kimchi and coffee, that have substances that stimulate NRF2. The most potent NRF2 stimulator in bioactive compounds is sulforaphane, that is found in broccoli sprouts. And broccoli sprouts is something we are now investigating the effects of in chronic kidney disease. So this leads me to the last part of my talk, and that is what we are eating. We live on a hungry planet, and I find these photos of what the family eats during 1 week in different parts of the world extremely interesting. Take a look at the family in the upper left corner, the family from Louisiana, and see what they eat during 1 week, and compare it to the family on the lower right part. It's a peasant family from Ecuador, and it's like they are living on different planets. And of course, these eating habits will have an effect on aging and comorbidities. The link between what we eat and disease goes via the gut microbiome. And we know that there are intimate connections between the microbiota and organ functions. And we must be aware of now that our microbiota is changing, as I already alluded to. We are now experienced to an industrialized microbiota that has never before been experienced by Homo sapiens during evolution. And there are some factors that promote the healthy gut microbial biodiversity. It's like having a healthy rainforest in our guts. We know that the food with fibers, fermented food, coffee, beer, red wine, and water from wells are actually good for the gut microbiome. But our microbiome is threatened by a number of factors that will promote a poor diversity of our gut microbiome. And having a poor diversity is like having a palm tree plantation in your gut. Papers show that artificial sweeteners, salt, air pollution, poor socioeconomic position, higher temperature, nicotine, microplastics, antibiotics, proton pump inhibitors are all factors that affect our microbial biodiversity. And of course, last but not least, we have the ultra-processed industrialized food, the toxic food that we all like so much because it tastes good and it's comparables cheap, and it takes little time to get this food in this era of the great acceleration. When everything goes so fast, we need to have food quickly. And if you want to change environmental sustainability, I think food is the single stronger level. If you want to optimize environmental sustainability and also optimize human health. And we have learned now from the Eat Lancet Commission that food is responsible for almost 30% of the greenhouse gas emissions on our planet. Food production causes 70% of all the freshwater withdrawals, and it's also a main factor that drives loss of biodiversity and tropical deforestation. So if we want to adhere to the Paris Agreement and lower the greenhouse gas emissions, we really need to rapidly change our eating habits. If we continue to eat as we do today with a growing population, the greenhouse gas emissions from food consumption will almost double until 2050. But if we can introduce healthy and sustainable diets and reduce food loss and waste, it may be possible to reduce the greenhouse gas emissions. So I really believe that the radical transformation of the global food system is urgently needed. And if we can move more into locally produced plant-based diets with grains, fermented nutrients, limit the intake of red meat, there is no doubt this will reduce the risk of burden lifestyle diseases. And we know from many studies like this one that you can really affect healthy aging, and you can live up to 10 years longer if you change your eating habits in the 40s. So there is a massive scientific evidence that it is possible to affect your lives, to affect your aging and risk for burden of lifestyle diseases by changing your diet. But if you can transform your diet with this, you will also reduce greenhouse gas emission dramatically. And it's also possible that you will increase your resistance against environmental threats, such as air pollution. And here we have an unprecedented opportunity, because here we have a win-win-win opportunity just by changing our global food systems. So my main message today is that the power is in your plate. And with that, I'd like to thank you for your attention. And if you're interested to learn more about this, I have published now a book called The Learning from Nature, The Power of Biological Intelligence. And here I am discussing all these things in the lecture in much more detail. So thank you for listening.
Thank you so much, Professor. It was extremely interesting and really inspiring, and thank you. I would say tack så mycket, if it's
very good.
Bra. And we've got many listeners during our lectures. So I would like to ask if there are any questions, and I really encourage you, because you've got a unique occasion to ask a question for this amazing tutor and lecturer. Maybe let's do like this. If anyone would like to ask a question, you've got an option with the hand at the bottom of your monitors. You've got reactions. I think that everyone knows Zoom, but just in case, I would like to explain you the procedure. So you can just put your hand up and just feel free and use this occasion with our specialist in here in the lecture. Anyone? Is there anyone who'd like to? So maybe I will ask you firstly, I will ask you a question. I know that recently it is quite often, and I can hear, I mean, from everywhere, something like eating window. Have you ever heard about this? And I would like to know your opinion. What do you think about this eating window? That means that you eat for some time and then you've got the break without eating. It's comes really popular in Poland, and I would like to know your opinion about it.
Yes, I think that fasting, periodic fasting, is part of what you see in animal species that live in extreme conditions in the environments, such as the bears, and many other animals are subjected to periodic fasting. And it's interesting to see that I think in I guess all major religions, fasting is part of major religions. And there are now scientific evidence actually suggesting that with periodic fasting you may enhance you lower the risk of oxidative stress, you will increase NRF2 levels, and that is something that may be of benefit for your health. So I must say that I believe that periodic fasting may be something that our humans have been intended from evolution, because in older days we didn't have food during the whole year. There were periods when there was a shortage of food, and so I think our evolution has adapted to this. So in my personal opinion, I think that periodic fasting is something that is probably good for our health.
Our health. Thank you so much. We've got another question. I think that I cannot see your surname, sorry, but there is someone whose name is Bartosz. Could you, I can see your hand up, could you?
I'm trying to I'm trying to switch on my camera, but I cannot. I'm sorry for that. Thank you for absolutely fantastic lecture, very fascinating. And what was present in my head when I was listening to that, I'm sorry, was something like clanging in my head about the conception that has been also somehow popular, and I heard that which when I heard that for the first time, it was somehow a shock to me, but it's actually true when one's thinking on it, that in fact the human brain has not actually changed for like tens of thousands of years. So biologically, the human brain has been the same since the times before civilization started. And there has been a kind of conception that possibly, and that's what I somehow see here, that that possibly we should try to take some wisdom from the primary people, how they lived and how they used nature before they created civilization. So that's somehow fascinating how the scientific findings, the science itself, drives us to that somehow back in time. Could you possibly comment on that?
Yeah, you're right. That the human brain is essentially the same as it was many thousand years ago. It has not changed much. So I think now we are seeing these epidemics of burn lifestyle diseases is just a mismatch between what has the biology of our human bodies and what it has been created for, and what we are now subjected to during the great acceleration. And of course there have been many improvements with drugs and modern medicines that make us now living longer with antibiotics and treatment of cardiovascular disease, but these burden lifestyle diseases is increasing. Although we live longer, we are sicker now due to all these burden lifestyle diseases that I see as partly as a mismatch between what our bodies are created for and how we are susceptible to many of the environmental changes that we now see affect human lifespan and increase the risk for diseases. And as a nephrologist, I really think that the kidneys are probably the most sensitive barometer for changes in the climate. To see the kidneys are the black lungs of climate change. We see now that more than 14% of the global population actually have kidney disease, the majority without knowing about it. And it can be a part attributed to hypertension, type 2 diabetes, and that we live longer. But there are many factors within the climate range that actually seems to increase the risk of kidney disease. So and we have other diseases like dementia, which I think also in part is attributed to the same factor as kidney disease and related to changes in the climate and the environment. So we live in bodies that are not really prepared for living in the great acceleration. That is, I think, my best way to try to summarize this. And the food, of course, the food we eat now, we know that the ultra-processed food is making us sick. There's no doubt about it. Our gut bacteria are not really used to being exposed to all these additives and the plastics and the salt, all the fat we are getting with the modern food that we like so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for this answer. And is there anyone who'd like to ask another question? Dear students, I'm counting on you. You've got really, I can see my student. Thank you so much. Isr, first year student, English program, medicine.
Hello.
Hello.
I was just wondering, what are your thoughts on energy drinks?
Energy drinks? You mean like Red Bull? Is that the kind of energy drinks you're referring to? Red Bull and others? That is, well, I think in small amounts, maybe no problem. But we have seen that especially Red Bull is rich in taurine, that is not good for patients with kidney disease. And we know that if you have an excessive drinking of energy drinks, that could be harmful for many reasons, with driving catecholamines and stressing the cardiovascular system. It is probably not a big risk if you are young and otherwise healthy, but in susceptible individuals, I would be a little bit careful with excessive drinking.
Thank you very much. And now we have one question in our chat from Jarosław Przybyciński. Thank you for the excellent talk. Do you think that it would be possible for state-driven promotion of healthy, affordable food, or the focus would go for the industry-driven novel products such as broccoli sprout extract or something similar?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's difficult to answer, but of course, if we can get help from the state to with, for example, taxes on carbohydrate-rich food and the ultra-processed food, that will help. I think, though, the main problem today is that we lack time. We don't really have the time to cook food from the basics. It takes a long time, and we are all stressed by living our lives, and get food to eat. And the one solution is to buy this energy dense food that we taste very good, and it takes very short time to cook it. You just heat it in the microwave oven, and that is one of the major problems. But I would for sure appreciate help from the government here, to maybe with taxes on some of this most dangerous food, so that it will be easier for people to choose the plant-based diet here. That we humans are omnivores, so we are designed to eat almost everything, but we in excess, I think we need to reduce our intake of red meat. We eat way too much red meat and ultra processed food, and move more into plant-based diet, not only for our health but also for the environment. The red meat industry accounts for 30% of all the greenhouse gas emissions that come from food production. So it's a really big player here.
Thank you. Anyone else? No. Natalia Kowalska, please. Hello. I'm afraid that we cannot hear you, so I think that you need to turn on your microphone. Maybe it's switched off. Okay, so I cannot see any questions. I think that our meeting comes to the end, and on behalf of the whole society of the Pomeranian Medical University, starting with the rector. Unfortunately, he couldn't attend today. He's really busy, and his duty didn't allow to attend for the meeting today. But dear professor, thank you very much once again for your amazing lecture. We will remember about all of your instructions, and we will implement your knowledge in our life. Thank you so much. It was really good to see you. Hopefully, next time you're going to visit us here in Szczecin, and we warmly invite you here. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Thank you.